Good afternoon and welcome to a Choice live stream. I'm Jonathan Brown and it's lovely to have your company today. COVID-19 is causing a lot of stress in the community and understandably we're all struggling through this tough time. Here at Choice, we are Australia's non-profit consumer advocate and we're working really hard to make sure that good information is getting out to the community about you and your consumer rights. For this live stream today, we are taking your questions about travel and particularly when it comes to COVID-19, the travel industry has been very heavily impacted. And today we're going to talk through your rights when it comes to cancellations, refunds, dealing with airplanes and also travel agents and a range of different businesses across the travel industry. You can go to the Choice website and read a range of different articles and information on COVID-19. For this live stream, you can also get in touch with us in the comments, also on Twitter at Choice Australia. And the Choice community forums are a really important part of our coverage of COVID-19. We're getting really important tip-offs from the community, and we should say a particular thank you to everyone who is getting in touch with Choice and giving us information to help out during this COVID-19 situation. So again, those details, you can leave us a comment below. You can also get in touch on Twitter at Choice Australia, but we also do encourage you to join the Choice community. Just go to choice.community in your browser and you can join our forums to continue helping out with all of the amazing people in the community who are helping Choice to fulfill our role as a consumer advocate. We have a big stream for you this afternoon to go through. Lots of ground to cover when it comes to travel. It is, of course, a really tough time. We're all trying to balance how do we assert our consumer rights whilst also looking out for businesses and people who are doing it tough in the community. But also for many of us, we just need to get our money back at such a financially stressed time, and trying to get refunds when all of this is going on or assert your other consumer rights can be quite tricky. And it's also been one of the most popular topics on choice.com.au. I'm joined by Jody Bird, who is our travel expert at Choice. Jody, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
So can we get started with what are the main things you're hearing from the community? What are the big questions that are coming up when it comes to travel and people's experiences with these companies?
Yeah, so probably the most important point at this point in time is with regards to trying to get through to travel providers or travel agents. A lot of people are having trouble just getting through on the phone or even getting a reply on email. The thing to bear in mind is that we use the term unprecedented a lot right now, and in terms of the travel industry, the request to cancel or rearrange a trip is an unprecedented workload. There's millions of people that go travelling every year, and right now everyone in Australia who has a trip booked for 2020 is currently trying to cancel or rearrange that trip.
Okay, so Jody, can you explain to us specifically what are the consumer rights issues that we're seeing come up the most?
So the main issue we see is in relation to where perhaps you're offered, say, a travel credit and you want to get a refund. Obviously, a lot of people are going to be financially affected at this time and they want money, not travel credit. Usually under your Australian consumer law, consumer guarantees, where a service isn't provided, you have recourse to refund. But the fact that this event is out of control of both yourself and the travel providers does affect those rights to a certain extent. So what we're seeing is that it generally comes down to the terms and conditions of the contract that you have with a travel agent or a third-party booking site like Booking.com or Expedia. or direct with an airline or accommodation provider. Sometimes those contracts will contain a clause saying what happens in case of that trip being cancelled due to events outside everyone's control. And sometimes it doesn't. So you just have a look at those terms and conditions and see what your rights are there. There are also, in some states of Australia, some rights with regards to frustration of contract. So this is a kind of a clause in general law where the contract, basically the providers can't fill out the contract or can't fulfill the services of the contract, and you can't actually take up those services. So possibly a frustration of contract could apply as well.
So can you take us through, we've had some really specific questions about cancellation fees. How do the rules apply when it comes to cancellation fees, Jody?
Yes, so travel agents and travel providers, they're allowed to charge cancellation fees, but those cancellation fees need to reflect the actual or the reasonable cost of processing the booking to start with and the cancellation. So you need to kind of bear in mind that, for example, if a travel agent is processing a cancellation, anyone who's tried to process cancellations recently will find that there's a lot of legwork involved in that. There's a lot of calling up airlines, calling up accommodation providers, trying to arrange for the money to be returned. So a reasonable cancellation fee should take into account that legwork. Things like office costs. Obviously, the travel agent needs to keep the lights on the office. They might need to print things out and sign them, so they need to pay for printing costs. So all of these things are taken into account in what's a reasonable cancellation fee. On the other hand, we have seen, for example, Flight Centre is charging a $300 cancellation fee, which doesn't sound too bad, but the problem there is that they charge it per person per booking, which means that if, for example, you've booked through Flight Centre flights, accommodation, a cruise, for example, for two people, then that $300 fee can quickly escalate to $1,800 for all those separate bookings per person, and then that starts to sound like quite a lot of money. So if you think that you're being charged a cancellation fee that is not reasonable, get back to the travel agent and say, look, I don't think this is reasonable. You can send them some information on the ACCC guidelines, and we have some content at the moment up on our site which has links out to those ACCC guidelines, and say, look, we don't think it's reasonable according to our consumer rights, and just say to them, if you're not able to find a remedy for us, we will look at escalating this to our state consumer affairs body, and that information is also we have online at the moment.
You've been working in this space for quite a few years now, Jody. How can people go about getting the confidence to assert their rights at this time? I mean, obviously, it's a very stressful time for everyone. What are the kind of words, what's the language you need to use in order to access those rights and be an effective advocate for yourself?
So the first point is to have a look at the terms and conditions of the contract you've entered into. So if you can say, I refer to a specific term and condition in your contract to a travel provider or a travel agent, they'll know straight up that, okay, this person has read up about their rights according to our contract. And then if you have a look at the terms and conditions of that contract and you're not happy with it, you can have a look at the relevant guidance on where Australian consumer law or where general law applies. And again, we have that information on our site where it might apply, and we point you in the right direction. So again, you can then refer to the kind of travel agent or whoever you're speaking to about the relevant conditions there in law. So the key really is to show that you have researched your rights, and then you're aware of what you're entitled to, and tell whoever it is that you're speaking to about what your rights are, and what you expect to get from them. It's very important to be clear exactly about what you expect to get from them, whether that be down to a specific monetary value, or whether that just be about you want to rebook for a specific date, or you want to get a deposit back, or you want to get a travel credit.
Thank you for joining us for this Choice live stream talking about your travel rights and your consumer rights when it comes to travel in the COVID-19 situation. You can ask a question for Jody, our travel expert. You can leave a comment here on Facebook. You can tweet us at Choice Australia. And also the Choice community is our community forums where you can get in touch. And I'll make a particular point that our community is doing a fantastic job at the moment. Choice is a non-profit organisation and we really rely on your tip-offs to help us, particularly at a time like this where there's lots of different things going on, lots of information out there in the community, and trying to pick through it is particularly tough. Jody, another area that's come up quite a bit and we've been dealing with when this crisis started quite early on is travel insurance. What have you seen from travel insurance companies so far, and what's the situation there?
So travel insurance, generally speaking, if you some kind of recourse to claim from the travel insurer, so just because your terms and conditions might say you're not covered, don't take that as a given. Speak to your travel insurer and see if you can get something back from them.
Now, Jody, we did briefly just lose connection there, so I might actually get you to repeat some of that information. We were just talking about what is the situation with travel insurance. When this whole situation started a couple of months ago, we did see some of the terms and conditions. Well, to be frank, it's gotten very confusing when it comes to travel insurance. What is the situation with travel insurance and COVID-19 at the moment?
So at the moment, what we're seeing is that several travel insurers have kind of built-in exclusions for pandemic or exclusions for coronavirus. That shouldn't be backdatable. So if you purchased a policy before about the 31st of January that covered pandemic or epidemic, you should still be able to make a claim on your insurance. If you purchased a policy after about the 31st of January that may or may not cover pandemic or epidemic, check with your travel insurer to see if you have some kind of cover there. But yes, it does get more confusing as the situation goes on. In a sense, it's a bit clearer now because no one's really going travelling, so no one's buying travel insurance right now. But yeah, do speak to your travel insurer and bear in mind that the travel insurers, as for the whole industry, everyone is very busy. So if you don't have a trip booked in the next few days, wait a bit longer before you speak to them about what you're entitled to.
If you have any questions for Jody, you can leave them in the comments below, but you can also tweet us at Choice Australia or join the Choice community forums at choice.community. Jody, what are you hearing from the public? Because we do have a lot of people get in touch with us. What are the big concerns and I guess struggles people are having when it comes to contacting companies and trying to assert their rights? What are the key themes you're seeing in this contact from the community?
So the big one lately has been with regards to travel agent cancellation fees, which we covered earlier. And again, if you think that fee is unreasonable, then visit the Choice site. We've got some information there to help you speak to the travel agent about that. The other big thing that we're getting is where a deposit has, well, you've put down a deposit and your payment is due to come up. And of course, most people don't want to pay the balance of a trip right now because the trip might not happen. We've seen a few instances where travel agents or providers have said, well, if you don't pay the rest of the trip, we're going to cancel it and keep your deposit. Again, we've got some advice online about that. In a nutshell, it is possible that a travel agent can keep your deposit, but that does have to be a reasonable deposit. And generally speaking, the Australian Consumer Law sees a reasonable deposit as about 10% of the total payment. So if your deposit is more than 10%, so we've seen cases where people have deposits of, say, 25%, while in the terms and conditions of your contract it might say that's a deposit. Actually, Australian consumer law looks at that as a prepayment, not a deposit. And prepayments under the Australian consumer law are refundable. So it's worth pointing that information out. If you have someone trying to keep a deposit, go to our content online and look for that advice, and we'll point you to the specific ACCC guidelines there, and you can send that to your travel agent and say, or whoever it is, a third-party booking provider, and say, look, we want our deposit back. Here's the steps we're going to take if we don't get that deposit back. And essentially that step will involve either a credit card chargeback or escalating your complaint to your state consumer affairs body. The other complaint that we've seen has been, again, in regards to travel agents or third-party booking sites where they've got refunds from airlines and accommodation, and then they've kept that refund as a travel credit, where that, as far as we can tell, that seems to be something they're allowed to do. Your contract is with the travel agent or the third-party provider, not directly with that provider. So from what we can tell, they are able to get that refund and they keep that money on credit. Just make sure you keep in touch with your kind of travel agent there and make sure that you still got that credit available.
Thank you for joining us for this Choice live stream talking about travel and your consumer rights with COVID-19. Thank you for your questions. Jody, one question that is coming up in the comments a fair bit is people asking about the process. Should we be waiting for the airline to cancel our flights, or should we be making the decision to cancel the flight ourselves? What's the best way to go about that process?
So generally speaking, you will tend to have more rights if you wait for the airline to cancel the flight. It depends who you're flying with. So, for example, if you're flying with one of the... sorry, I've just got a garage door closing here. If you're flying with one of the budget airlines like Jetstar, then you're probably only going to get a travel credit anyway. But if you're flying with an airline, for example, like Virgin or Qantas, if you wait for them to actually cancel the flight, they've got their information up online at the moment that says, okay, here's our kind of terms with regards to coronavirus, and they will say that we'll give you a travel credit or we will rebook without fee. What they don't mention in that coronavirus advice is if you have a look at the usual conditions of carriage for Virgin and Qantas, buried in there is a line that usually says something like, if you request a refund for a flight that we've cancelled, then we'll give it to you. So if you are after actual cash, if you wait for the airline to actually cancel that flight, then you have more recourse to get a refund as opposed to a travel credit if that's what you're after.
We are getting a lot of assistance from the Choice community and some great tip-offs. How can people help Choice in this travel space? What type of information is useful for you and your team in writing on this? What do you want to hear from people?
Actually, any kind of information, if you can go onto the Choice community, that's a great resource where you can post any, say, experience you have or any questions that you have. Go visit the Choice community. It's free to sign up. Post in a thread there. All of the Choice experts are looking at that, and we also have a lot of very knowledgeable consumer defenders on that community who are very helpful and quick with advice. But yes, we also are looking at that to essentially it helps us build up a case file for things that we might need to battle for down the line, or things that we even need to ask insurers or airlines about now.
And what are you and your team working on at the moment?
So at the moment we have, hopefully today or tomorrow, we'll have some advice going up on specifically what steps to take if you need to cancel or rearrange your holiday, because that can all become a bit of a muddle, and so it's really just a kind of a checklist of things to do. And we will also very soon be putting up advice on the airline refund policies. So I mentioned that just a bit before. Obviously, all of the airlines are allowing you to rebook or take a travel credit without any fees at the moment. But sometimes you also have a right to a refund, which they don't always mention. So we will put up some information on that for the Australian Airlines shortly.
You can find all of this information and a range of other topics related to COVID-19 at choice.com.au. Jody and I are here for just a few more minutes, so please do get in your questions. You can leave them in the comments. You can also get in touch with us on Twitter at Choice Australia. And as Jody's mentioned, the Choice community is a really great platform to be able to get some help from the community, but also be able to help out others in the community. We have a wonderful team of people who volunteer their time and help us to help people all across the community. Jody, can you take us through what is currently on the Choice website and what we've currently got up in terms of being able to help right now?
So what we currently have on the Choice website, we have some information on travel insurance and coronavirus. So under what circumstances are you covered by your travel insurance? What circumstances aren't you covered by your travel insurance? And what to do about trying to claim on your travel insurance for coronavirus. We also have information on dealing whether you're entitled to a refund from a travel agent or a third-party booking site like Expedia or Airbnb. So some resources there, just advice on how to get, say, a refund or a deposit, or whether or not your cancellation fee is fair, and how to kind of contact them and tell them that you want to enforce your rights and get some money back. We also have some content on there that's been on there for a while in relation to flight cancellations and delays. That refers to the general conditions of carriage of the airlines. We will, as I mentioned before, we'll put up some specific content soon about their coronavirus policies. But those general conditions of carriage still apply in this case. So you can have a look at what kind of compensation you're entitled to. And there's also a bit of information there on compensation from other countries. For example, the EU, New Zealand, the US, and I think even Indonesia have certain recourse to compensation. Not always when it's an event like this where it's out of their control, but sometimes they do.
Jody, can you take us through the process of complaining? What is the right way to complain if you're having an issue?
So the first place to complain if you have an issue is to the actual company you're dealing with. So whether it's a travel insurer or a travel agent or an airline, the first place to complain is to them and say, look, I don't think you've addressed what I'm after properly or my problem properly, and outline to them what steps you intend to take. So, for example, if you've read your terms and conditions and you've read the advice that is relevant in the Australian consumer law, say, look, I think that you've breached these certain conditions, and if you don't address that, I intend to raise that with the relevant authority, which will be your State Consumer Affairs Authority, which again will have that information on our site. Tell them that's what you intend to do. Often you will get a recourse through that. If you don't, then the next step is to escalate it to the next level. So yeah, if it's a travel agent or an airline, you can escalate it to the State Consumer Affairs Body. If it is an insurer, then there's the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, and they will take on external complaints about insurers.
We have some questions coming through, Jody. Nicole Brown says, my parents had their Qantas flight to the US cancelled. The credit is valid from 12 months of booking. Does this mean they need to fly within the 12 months or book within the 12 months? Hard to find an answer. This is quite a source of confusion for people, isn't it?
It is. We've seen quite a few questions about that. I need to clarify, but I think that it means that you need to book within that 12 months. But I need to double check on that, so don't quote me on it just yet. The other thing to bear in mind there is what we've seen from Qantas a couple of times is that they've, for example, a credit might be due to run out in August or September, and people are worried that the travel bans might still be in place then. What we've seen Qantas do is actually extend the validity of that travel credit. So each time they've said, okay, this looks like it's going to go on for longer than we hoped for, they've extended it. And I think at the moment they've kind of extended generally all travel credit until 31st of December this year, so yeah, it's later this year, or if you've got 12 months, then into next year. And I think they will continue to do that. It's obviously reasonable or unreasonable to make a claim of travel credit for when you're not able to travel.
Kate Taylor has a question for you. Is it ethical for insurance companies to keep their premium if they won't cover this virus? I booked insurance last year and their website states no cover. We have seen some of the insurance companies playing funny buggers with us, haven't we?
Yeah, that's a good question. So they're generally speaking, by the letter of the law, when you buy insurance, you get a 14-day cooling off period, and during that 14 days, you can get your money back on that insurance. What a lot of people are asking now is, I can't go on my trip, and the insurance was kind of useless anyway because it didn't cover me for coronavirus. Can I get my money back, or can I reschedule my travel insurance for a different time without having to fork out another premium? There's no kind of obligation on the travel insurers to do that. Whether it's ethical or not is a good question. I think what we're seeing is several insurers are coming out and saying, okay, we will allow people to take a credit for that travel insurance premium later on, or we will allow people to change the dates of their travel insurance. The question about whether it covers pandemic or not, I expect there will be a bit of a fallout in the months to come around what travel insurance does and doesn't cover. A lot of people obviously buy travel insurance to cover events like this. So it's not a good look for travel insurance that a lot of insurers haven't covered them during this period.
We have another question from Annika Little. Does insurance cover if you want to get a refund, but you're only able to get a credit with the supplier?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the best thing to do there is actually speak to your insurer. If you are able to get a credit and you're happy to take that credit, then the travel insurer will likely only cover any kind of out-of-pocket costs you have there. They won't necessarily give you the refund if you've taken that credit already. But if you really don't want the credit, then I think, again, speak to the travel insurer, but you might just need to just cancel altogether, not get the credit and claim that money from the insurer. But again, make sure you speak to your travel insurer about whether you can actually do that.
And what happens, Jody, if some of these businesses go out of business? What happens to your rights in those scenarios? Is there anything you can do?
Yeah, that scenario sucks. So it depends on the business. So, for example, if it's an airline, we've seen today that Virgin have asked the government for, I think, a $1.2 billion loan to help them get through this period. A lot of travel insurance will actually cover you for the insolvency of a travel provider. A travel provider being like a flight company or a accommodation company. So in that case, you might have recourse through your travel insurance. If it's a travel agent, there's very few travel insurance policies that will cover you for insolvency of a travel agent. By travel agents, there's obviously the traditional bricks and mortar travel agents, but there's also a lot of online travel agents. So we saw recently a company called Fly365, which is one of those online businesses that say bought fares up cheap from the airlines and then sold them online. They became insolvent, and people who had bought flights through them where they hadn't yet handed the money over to the airline, they ended up losing money because of that. The only real recourse there is if you have paid by credit card or by a Visa or Master debit card, you can possibly process a credit card chargeback. So in that case, you need to check your details with your credit card provider. There's usually a time limit between when you paid for the original fare or ticket and when you can actually process that credit card chargeback. So have a look at those terms and conditions of your credit card provider and see if you're still able to do that. That's usually the best recourse. The only other option there is basically you go on as an unsecured creditor. So you go onto a list of people asking for the money back from whatever is left of the remnants of that particular online travel agent or travel agent.
And we have been saying at Choice that, in some circumstances, maybe you've booked with a mum and dad business and you want to support them. Some people are choosing not to seek refunds. And so there's always that balance as to we don't want to see these businesses go under, and our rights are harder to enforce when that situation happens. So we're trying to think of everyone in the community in this circumstance and really wish everyone well and hope that a lot of these situations don't come to pass. Jody, we might do a bit of a recap on some of those really common questions that we've had. Can you take us through cancellation fees? What is the situation if you're being charged a cancellation fee?
So if you're being charged a cancellation fee, the agent or provider is allowed to charge cancellation fees as long as they reflect the reasonable costs of that cancellation. Bear in mind that there's a lot of legwork involved in processing cancellations. So just you need to kind of decide if you think that is a reasonable fee or not. If you don't think it's a reasonable fee, we have some content online pointing to the ACCC guidance on reasonable fees, and you can send that to the provider or travel agent and say, look, we don't think it's reasonable. Can you revisit this?
And what about vouchers when people are not being offered a refund, but they're being offered a voucher instead?
So again, that depends on the terms and conditions of the contract you have. So for example, if it's a travel agent, there'll be terms and conditions of that specific contract. And it'll say whether in this kind of instance where the event is out of the control of everyone, is there a specific clause in there that says whether you're entitled to a credit voucher or a refund? Also with airlines, for example, some airlines, usually the premium ones like Virgin and Qantas, their conditions of carriage is where you want to refer to. It'll say whether you're entitled to a voucher or a refund. So that's what you need to revisit there. There is also possibly in some states recourse through what we know as frustrated contracts. Frustrated contract being what it sounds like, where it's impossible to deliver on that contract. So you might be entitled to a refund under that law. The best way to figure that out is have a look at the content that we have online, and we'll point you in the right direction of where you need to visit that. And essentially that is going to be decided by the consumer affairs body in your state.
And what happens if you've paid a deposit for a holiday? What happens with the deposit?
So if you've paid for a deposit, generally speaking, travel agents or a booking site or provider, they are allowed to keep the deposit if the trip needs to be cancelled. But that deposit does need to be a reasonable deposit amount, which generally speaking, the Australian consumer law sees a reasonable deposit amount of 10%. So if it's more than 10%, then possibly could be considered a prepayment, in which case you're entitled to a refund. The other scenario there, I should correct myself, I did say that they can keep the deposit, but again, that can also be challenged by whether it's falls under the frustrated contract provisions in your state.
And just finally, when it comes to enforcing your rights, can you do a quick recap for us? What is the process you should follow if you need to go and chase a refund, or to go and get a credit?
So the process to follow is to familiarise yourself with the terms and conditions of the contract that you have. So that could be contract with a travel agent or the conditions of carriage of the airline. And in the first place, familiarise yourself with that. If you don't think those terms and conditions are fair, have a look at the ACCC guidance as to where the Australian consumer law or where general law could contradict those terms and conditions. And we have references to where you can find that information on our site. And basically, have a read of that, make sure you understand what you are entitled to, raise that in the first instance directly with the agent or provider, so that they understand that you have informed yourself of your rights, and tell them what steps you intend to take if they don't find a remedy, and be specific about what remedy you're after. So whether it be a specific dollar amount or a credit voucher or rebooking of your trip. If you don't get a satisfactory outcome from that, then the next stage is to escalate that complaint to the relevant authority. For most travel providers, that is going to be your state consumer affairs body. For travel insurance, that's going to be the Australian Financial Complaints Authority.
You can help Choice with this work by emailing us at newstips@choice.com.au, and also our community forums at choice.community. You can also join our campaigns. Behind the scenes, we're working on a range of consumer rights areas to hopefully help at this really tough time. And a big thank you to Choice members who do amazing work, often volunteering their time to help Choice with our consumer advocacy. You can become a Choice member or donate, and a big thank you to the people who do support our organisation. We are Australia's consumer non-profit organisation, and we're here to help you in the community. Thank you for joining us for this Facebook live stream. Jody Bird, our travel expert, thank you for joining me for this stream. Do you have any last words of advice for people who are dealing with travel companies and dealing with these issues at the moment? What are your parting words of advice?
Be patient. The travel industry is suffering unprecedented workloads right now, and they're going to be just as stressed as you are. So if you don't have a trip booked in the next few days, then leave it and speak to them a bit later. Hopefully, as time goes on, people will become less stressed and able to deal with your requests.
Jody Bird, thank you for joining for this live
Thanks.
stream. And you can get in touch with us at Choice Australia on Twitter, also here on Facebook in the comments. You can join our community forums at choice.community. At choice.com.au, we have a range of content to help with COVID-19. So choice.com.au is the place to go. I'm Jonathan Brown. Thank you so much for joining us for this Facebook live stream. Hopefully we have helped you in a few of these areas. We are working on a range of topics. If you would like to hear from any other Choice experts, please do let us know in the comments what other topics you would like us to write about, and more of these live streams. If you did like it, if you did find it helpful, please do let us know, and we can look at doing some more with our experts. A big thank you to my producer, Jim Hook, for helping put this together, and to the entire Choice team. And once again, I'll say thank you to Choice's members, our campaign supporters, and our community who are helping us at this really rough time for the community. We're doing everything we can at Choice to help however we can. Please do get in touch with us if there's anything we can do, any areas you want us to look into, but also do share those tips to us. Your information that you're sharing with us is helping us so much at this time to be able to help the rest of the community. I'm Jonathan Brown. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.